I'm going to go over the homework problems 37 to 42, and we're looking at how to solve equations using three different methods. One, using the quadratic formula, two, by factoring, and three, by completing the square. If you're, on each of these problems, we're starting with the same equation, so we should be getting the same answer. Okay, so starting with number 37. Quadratic formula, you make sure it's equal to 0. It is. Then you find A, B, and C. A is the number in front of x squared, B is the number in front of x, and C is your constant term with no x. And then you plug it into the quadratic formula, which is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. You want to memorize this formula. Alright, now let's start simplifying. So we're getting x is equal to plus or minus 2 over 2, which is positive or negative 1. Solving by factoring, it's a difference of two squares. Factors to x plus 1 times x minus 1. Set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Then we get negative 1 and positive 1, which is the same as plus or minus 1. And solving by completing the square. In this case, the square is complete. You need the method of completing the square, or the first part, if you have a linear term, or if b is not equal to 0. In this case, b is equal to 0. So most of the work is already done here. So the rest of the solving is to get the squared part by itself, and then to take the square root. And when we take the square root, it's going to be x is equal to, don't forget, plus or minus square root of 1, which is plus or minus 1. Alright, next one, number 38. First of all, using the quadratic formula, a is 1, b is 4, and c is 0. Not the 0 that it's equal to, but the 0 that is just non-existent. There's nothing after that 4x. Plug this into the quadratic formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. And we're going to simplify this. Negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared, and then the remaining part 0, all over 2, which is x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus 4 over 2. I'm going to split this up into two cases, negative 4 plus 4 over 2, and negative 4 minus 4 over 2. In the first case, we get 0 over 2, which is 0. In the second case, we get negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. So I got two answers. X is 0 and x is negative 4. By factoring, you factor out the greatest common factor here. Set each factor equal to 0 and solve. And we get x is 0 and x is negative 4 again. Completing the square here, first step, put the parentheses around the x squared and the x term, which we did. Second step, factor out the a, which is the same thing. So we get 1 times x squared plus 4x, leave a little room. Take b, which is 4 over 2, and square it. and we get 2 squared, which is 4. So I'm going to add 4 and subtract 4. Multiply the 1 with the fourth part, and you get x squared plus 4x plus 4, and then a minus 4 out here. And then what's in parentheses, the three terms, factors to a perfect square. That's why we call it completing the square. And it factors, I'm going to use the shortcut, is 2x plus b over 2. b is 4, so over 2 would be 2. So this is going to factor to x plus 2 squared. And if you were to multiply that out, to test it out, x plus 2 times another x plus 2, did all the distributing and simplifying, you'd end up back at your x squared plus 4x plus 4. You can check that out, but I'm using the shortcut that we have been using. So then solve for the squared part. So leave this part squared, x plus 2 squared, add 4 to both sides, take the square root of both sides, don't forget the plus or minus, and we get x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus 2, and then subtract 2 from both sides. And you get two cases here, negative 2 plus 2, which is 0, and negative 2 minus 2, which is negative 4. So again, x is 0, and x is negative 4. And all of these answers agree with each other. 39. we have A is -2, B is 8, C is -8. Quadratic formula is x is -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. And now simplify that. So -8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus, because there's a negative times a negative times a negative. And in this case, we get 64 all over -4. And it simplifies down really good to -8 over -4, which is just 2. So x equals 2 is our answer. Well, let's see what happens when we factor. When I factor, I'm going to factor out a -2. I want factor out the greatest common factor. I want the a to be positive before I factor. It just makes it easier. So I'm left with x squared minus, changes the sign here, minus 4x, and then a plus 4 equals 0. And then I continue to try to factor that down. I'm looking for two terms that multiply to 4x squared and add to -4x. And -2x and -2x works here. We got the -2 out in front. Split this to x squared minus 2x plus 4. Get 4 terms and factor by grouping. And when you're done factoring, you're going to get -2 times x minus 2 times another x minus 2 is equal to 0. When you solve by factoring, you set the factors equal to 0 that have a variable. So the -2 out in front is a factor, but there's no variable there, so I'm not going to set that equal to 0. Second one, though, is x minus 2. And the third one is x minus 2, and I'll set those equal to 0, but I get the same answer on both of them because they're the same factor. So just have one answer, x equals 2, and that agrees with what we got when we did the quadratic formula. Last part here, I'm going to solve by completing the square. Factor out a -2 from the first two terms. I'm left with a positive x squared minus 4x. Leave a little room, got a -8 out front, equals 0. Take the -4, which is b, cut that in half, and square it. And you get 4, so that's what I'm going to add and subtract inside the parentheses. Then I'm going to take the a, the -2, and multiply it with the fourth term inside the parentheses. I get x squared minus 4x plus 4 plus 8 minus 8 equals 0. The plus 8 and minus 8 zeros out, and the x squared minus 4x plus 4 ends up factoring to a perfect square, which is x minus 2 squared. I got the 2 from half of b, so b is -4, half of b would be -2. Take the square root of both sides. Really don't need the plus or minus here because it's square root of 0. And we end up with x minus 2 is equal to 0. And then we end up with x is 2. Same answer, different method. There you go. Hope things are going well. See you on the next lesson.